You are listening to Gangland Wire, hosted by former Kansas City Police Intelligence Unit Detective Gary Jenkins.
Well, welcome all you wiretappers out there. It's good to be back here in the studio of Gangland Wire. I have a really interesting guest. I just told him that when I first saw his book several years ago, his first book, and I just happened to be in the library and the title caught me, something about the Hells Angels. And I thought, well, what's that? And I pulled it out of the shelf and I started reading it. And I was hooked, and I checked that book out and took it home. Jay, sorry I didn't buy it. I got it from the library. Anyhow, folks, this is Jay Dobyns, a former retired ATF agent, worked undercover on the Hells Angels, and then had some problems with the ATF later on. And so I really am excited to have you here, Jay.
Gary, thank you for having me, and welcome to your audience.
So Jay was an ATF agent. First of all, he's got, I see my notes here. He's got two books, Hells Angels. Jay, why don't you just tell us the name of your books?
Yeah, the first book I wrote is titled No Angel, which is a kind of a case study of an undercover infiltration of the Hells Angels in Arizona and on the West Coast. And then about 7 or 8 years later, I wrote a follow-up book called Catching Hell, which is a bigger picture memoir type story.
So you also now today, you're totally out of all that life. You've got two books out there. You do public speaking?
I do a little bit. You know what? I really spend most of my time. I'm a high school football coach. And really? So that eats a lot of my time.
Well, let's go into your background a little bit. I read up a little bit about you. You played some football, right?
I did. That's what actually led to my coaching is, as a kid through college, a very short professional stint, I was a football player. And so I always had a love for that and for the game. And now I'm trying to coach it.
Interesting. Well, guy ought to do what he loves to do and make some money. If you can make some money at it, that's the ticket, isn't it?
Oh, I'll tell you what, there's zero money to be made being a high school football coach.
Yeah, really. I was going to talk about coaches making money. Now, those college coaches, I saw that deal on the news. You may have seen that recently where, was it University of Kentucky? The coach makes more money, $6 million a year. That's more than the entire budget of the athletic department of that team, St. Peter's or St. Something that almost beat them. So high school coaches are woefully underpaid, and some of those college coaches are a bit overpaid, if you ask me.
It's a good job if you can get it.
Yeah, it's always the highest paid public employee or state employee in every state is your major college football coach or basketball coach or both.
Well, those guys are responsible for generating so much money for the universities. When they can build a winning program and teams win, people come to see them. They buy tickets, they buy all the concessions, and billions and billions of dollars are churned through college and professional football.
Oh man, I tell you, plus the logo equipment and t-shirts and all that. It's amazing. So you ended up being an ATF agent after your football career, it sounds like, in your college. You did college. And where'd you go to college?
I went to the University of Arizona.
Okay. So you were a Sun Devil.
Careful now. We're the Wildcats.
Oh, you're the Wildcats. Oh,
yeah, the Sun Devils are up the road, and we try not to mention their name if at all possible.
Oh my God, that's the other one. I apologize. Folks, I started off on the wrong foot with my friend Jay Dobyns.
Oh, you're giving props to my rivals, man. Easy now.
Really. Anyhow, moving right along before he starts pulling me through this screen and beating the crap out of me. So you ended up with the ATF. Now, was that your first law enforcement career, or did some guys go to local PD or state patrol and then go into federal?
It was. When I entered law enforcement, I had a dream to work undercover. Mm-hmm. And ATF had the premier undercover program in federal law enforcement. So, with a sports analogy, it was like being an undercover at ATF was like playing shortstop for the New York Yankees. Like I wanted to play in the big time and I wanted to play for the best. And so it was a natural fit.
Interesting. Now, back then, of course, you went to, I think it's Glencoe was your academy, but then did you have more specific training to be undercover? And did you have to go out and be a street agent for a little bit and then go back into the undercover school and undercover jobs?
Yeah, at ATF, all of our undercover operators are street agents first. They're investigators first. It's a technique, a trade craft that's developed. And some of it's developed through training exercises and practical exercises and being mentored by experienced operators. But really, you learn the job trial by fire.
Yeah.
You get out there and you do it and you make mistakes and you try not to repeat those and you try to repeat your successes. And then, over the course of time, the ones that stick with it, refine that trade craft and get good at it.
Yeah, it's a certain skill that can be developed, I believe, but I think you also have to have a certain innate ability to do that. As we discussed before, I never worked actual undercover, would go into bars and sit while a real undercover might be in there doing something and just kind of back up or follow people around and that kind of a thing. And
well, we talked about before we started recording, like I wanted to work undercover. That was my dream, but I was never very good at any of the other elements of the job. I was never a great detective. I was not necessarily the best guy to put the puzzle pieces together on an investigation. That I never have claimed to even be the best undercover operator, man. It's what I loved.
Yeah.
And every day when my alarm clock went off, I put my feet on the ground and I came to work and did the very best I could.
Suited up and showed up, right? That's all we can do at any job.
Yes, sir.
So I guess what we ought to talk about, I think, which drew me was some of these stories in your first book, and it was this Operation Black Biscuit. Was that wasn't your very first go, I guess, or was it?
Oh no! By the time the Hells Angels infiltration started, which was titled Operation Black Biscuit that you referenced, by the time that opportunity arrived, I had 15 years of undercover experience under my belt. So
I'd forgotten that. So you did little jobs in between.
Yeah, I had, I had bought guns from pea shooters to rocket launchers, drugs from, street dope to cartel dope, explosive devices from homemade PVC pipe bombs to servo activated remote controlled C4 devices, gang infiltrations, home invasion cases, murder for hires where I played a contract killer. So ultimately, when the opportunity came up on the Hells Angels investigation, man, I had quite a bit of experience under my belt to take a shot at it.
Yeah, you did. I tell you what, buying those that dynamite or C4, those bomb parts and all that had to be rather ticklish because you're dealing with people who don't really know what they're doing. They just got something to sell usually, and those things. Boy.
Well, over the course of my career, like on the explosive side, ATF has the federal firearms and explosives laws and violent crime laws. Over the course of my career, like I've handled personally, like purchased undercover, like over 250 IEDs. So it was like, a real life unprotected hurt locker.
Really?
I wasn't the guy who dismantled them or diffused them, but like you're meeting some knucklehead out on the street and buying devices that he's made on a workbench in his garage. So there's no reliability to him.
Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah, that would be very, very dangerous, more dangerous than all the rest of it put together, more dangerous than really being exposed many times, as one of my early sergeants told me. He said, if you're like working, you're in a bar or something, and people say, focus on you, and they think you're like an informant or some threat. That was our biggest fear. They thought we were an informant. just get your badge out and say, hey, I'm the police. And usually that all ends right there and everybody just backs off.
Well, in the explosive game, it gets real when you complete the deal and you go to transfer the devices you purchased and you're in street clothes and you pull them out of the trunk of your car and the bomb tech that's taken them from you is fully suited up in a bomb suit and transfers them into a bomb containment device. Man, it gets real.
Really? Yeah, it could get real fast out there in that world. There's always something. That had a guy from Mississippi the other day, and a guy was showing, he was undercover for the state police down there, and a guy was showing him a gun, and he wanted to get the serial numbers off of it. So he said, let me borrow this gun for a couple of days. I need to do something. I'll get it back. I'll pay you for it. And stuck it in his belt. And that guy like cut loose on him. I mean, he went nuts on him. He said, I learned that don't just take somebody's gun from them. Make sure that they agreed with what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game for sure.
Really. So this, the Hells Angels, now they're notoriously, cliquish, clandestine, if you don't walk into a Hells Angels clubhouse and just say, hey, here I am, I've got a Harley, well, guys, let me buy you a beer. How did that work for you?
No, there's some that try that approach, but like, these are not guys that you knock on the front door and ask to fill out an application.
Yeah.
They've grown into an international organized crime syndicate. They're on every continent. They're in nearly every country. And they're very skeptical. They're uniquely paranoid. And they are because they have to be. That's how they stay out of jail. They don't trust people. They don't welcome people in. They're not quick to embrace outsiders. And so the process of getting close to them and earning trust and gaining loyalty is not an overnight job. It's a long-term operation.
Really? So now in this particular case, did you have an informant, a cooperating person who then verified you, said, hey, this dude's okay, introduced you in?
It would be extremely narcissistic of me to take credit for what we accomplished. I was part of a task force.
Yeah.
I was one member of a team that worked on this. And that team involved other undercover agents. It involved informants and street sources. And then it involved, case agents and intelligence officers and surveillance officers. And it was a sizable task force operation. Like, I just had one role within that team, which was to lead the undercover portion of the investigation.
So when you get in, you have to go into they always have a clubhouse, it seems to be like. So what was that like? Tell these guys about what that's like, walking in there and trying to fit in.
Well, you're especially early on in the process, later in the process, I was much more comfortable. Early in the process, it's a pretty intimidating experience. You walk in, they have entire control. You're outnumbered, you're outgunned. The first time I walked into Hells Angels clubhouse, they dropped a barricade across the door. And so there was no easy exit or entrance there. Yeah. Like, we're inside. And then you get inside and it's loaded with members. Like I said, you're outnumbered, you're outgunned, all kinds of crazy activities going on, drug use, drinking, partying, girls. But the Hells Angels clubhouses that I was in are like mini museums that are tributes to the gang, loaded with plaques and pictures and banners and stories. And it's actually a pretty impressive display that they put on that honors the heroes and the history of the gang.
Interesting. So now when you walked in, say that first time, you had to have somebody with you that vouched for you, I would assume.
Well, that had been prearranged with some street meetings and associations. Like I said, you don't just knock on the door and walk in and say, hey guys, I want to take a look around. You're invited there. and you're there as a guest. And, in the Hells Angels world, that name, that insignia, the death head that they display, that's their religion.
Yeah.
Like everything rotates around that. And so you damn sure better be respectful of their religion, and especially when you're in their house, because you get sideways with these guys. They're not the kind of people that are going to like tap you on the shoulder and help you get to the front door and ask you to not come back. They're going to put a baseball bat on your head.
Mm-hmm. So now, were you wearing some kind of colors? Did you guys? I know somebody out there out west created a whole kind of a fake motorcycle gang and had colors that was actually based in Mexico. Was that you guys?
That was, but the gang that we had pre-infiltrated, it was not a hoax gang.
Oh, okay.
We had become members of a gang known as the Solo Angels. And we infiltrated that gang, not to investigate them, but purely just to wear their colors and have credibility in the biker world, so that when we were with the Hells Angels, we weren't entirely outsiders. We were integrated into that lifestyle. All right,
I get you now. Interesting. That was a long term.
So, in order to infiltrate the primary gang, we infiltrated a sub gang to start,
Wow.
to enhance our credibility. So there was actually 2 infiltrations within one investigation.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. Now let me ask you this question. I don't know if you even ran across this. I know we had a Kansas City policeman who was a motorcyclist, but he's just like a regular policeman. But I found out a little later in my career, he'd actually worked for me, and when I was back in patrol and I was a sergeant. And I found out a little later that he was actually kind of an associate member of a local Galloping Gooses gang that he had, I found out he had ridden with them, and I bet like the Hells Angels, they're so as kind of charismatic. It might be not the right word, but there's a lot of people in all areas of society kind of want to have that some connection to something like that. And so I guess, did they have, I assume they probably had policemen and doctors and lawyers and people that kind of were like groupies almost, that want to hang around with them or be somehow connected to them, which would then make your job a little harder, especially if they had some cops.
Well, the biker lifestyle is Americana, and it's intriguing to a lot of people. It's fascinating to a lot of people. And so all walks of life have shown an interest in that lifestyle. Very few can live it to the 1%er level, to that outlaw criminal, all in nasty, violent, dangerous lifestyle that it is at the inner circle. But there's a lot of people around the edges that at least pretend to dabble in that world. And, they're the guys, we call them rubs, rich urban bikers. Those are the guys that, have the 80, 90, $100,000 motorcycles, and they put on a bandana on the weekend and some wraparound sunglasses, and then ride around town and look hard at people at stoplights and pretend to be something they're not.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I've always wondered about that. I see those guys. I know a couple of them actually that are, obviously not even connected at all. And I'm thinking more of like associate members of the Angels, for example, like the mob has associates that aren't made guys that will do stuff for them. And so do the Hells Angels have that? Yeah, sure.
There's sub clubs, there's duck clubs that work in association with them, under them. And then there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people out there that just like the lifestyle. They embrace that culture. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to ride your motorcycle around or ride with your friends or join a club that enjoys the lifestyle that brings. There's nothing wrong with that. But those people aren't out there murdering and raping and selling drugs and selling guns and doing assaults. They're writing for the love of the experience. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So let's tell these guys that the one great story, the murder of the Mongol. That's like one of the ultimate great stories of working undercover and doing a job.
Well, the Hells Angels' big rival in the West, at least, is the Mongols motorcycle gang. And they've had, a 30, 40 year bloodbath rivalry. And so towards the end of our case, in order to push ourselves over the top and convince the Hells Angels that we were worthy of their membership, I offered to kill a Mongol. And that was very quickly embraced. It was, they were excited that I was willing to do that, to the point where they gave me the gun to do the murder with, and explained, to me how they felt I should do it. So we got a Mongol and we went out in the desert and dug a shallow grave and duct taped this guy's hands and his feet behind his back. And he was shot in the head, and took pictures of the crime scene and cut the bloody Mongol vest off his back and took it back to the Hells Angels and explained to them that we had just taken care of business and we had committed a murder on behalf of the Hells Angels against their primary rival. The Hells Angels, embrace that. When you go to any of us, any normal person, any civilian or citizen, and tell them that you just committed a murder and then show them evidence of that murder, they're running the other direction while they're dialing 911. The Hells Angels were the exact opposite. They embraced it. They put Hells Angels patches on our backs as a reward for what we had done.
Wow.
What they didn't know is that it was an entire fabrication.
Yeah.
The murder was a hoax. We fake murdered a member of our task force, and we used cow blood and cow guts to dress up the murder scene and then took pictures of it. So this fabricated murder was all self-invented. So when we were delivering evidence of a homicide to them, it was self-created. It was all a part of the street theater act that we were using to, push their trust and loyalty and love over the top.
Cool. Now, were you able to snag some of those pictures when you left and be able to put them in your book?
Oh, yeah.
People buy that book, be able to see those pictures.
Well, and I'll tell you what, even experienced homicide investigators that were looking at the crime scene that we had created believed it to be true, because we couldn't afford a mistake. We couldn't take we couldn't take the evidence of this homicide to the Hells Angels without 100% certainty that it was believable. And so we had back-checked that and vetted, our story and the pictures and the evidence with homicide detectives before we ever delivered it to our suspects, just to make sure that it was believable.
Wow, that's quite a story. So now what was like, so now you're in, they've given you patch, your patch wearer. This is like unheard of, never happened before or since. You become a patch wearer wearing Hells Angels. And so then you're trying to build like a RICO case, like an organizational case for the different crimes that they're involved in, and be able to show the hierarchy. Was that your focus of your investigation?
Well, in all fairness and for accuracy and authenticity, there's a dispute, and it's a valid dispute on both sides as to what the status of our membership was. We faked the murder. The Hells Angels I was dealing with, they put patches on our back and they said, "Hey, welcome to the gang. You're Hells Angels now. You took care of business." But they also said, like, we don't have the full authority to do this on our own. We have to take a vote. So within our charter, we were considered Hells Angels and we were given Hells Angels cuts. The vote, the national vote for our membership never took place. And so that's their dispute. That's the Hells Angels argument. They're saying, hey, this was never fully sanctioned.
Yeah.
This was never fully approved. That's not an inaccurate statement.
So
They never took a national vote.
they
But
can
also
keep
an
their
accurate
pride.
statement. What's also accurate is that at that time in that place, those Hells Angels said, "You're Hells Angels now." And this isn't just some poo butts down in the bottom of the ladder. This was officers and executives and leadership of the charter I was in. So, but the glitch was, yes, we were building a conspiracy case. We were building a large scale RICO case. We indicted 55 members and associates. 16 of them were indicted on RICO charges, but the case itself was just, it was one part of a big picture. There was stuff going on with these guys all over the country, and there was people working them all over the country, all over the globe for that matter.
Yeah. So now, folks, just to kind of go back over, I know I've said this before, like a RICO case. They find where lower level members will do some kind of a crime. They sell drugs. They make a case on buy some drugs from them. Maybe they buy some guns from them. They make some little cases, and then people like Jay and maybe any storytellers that they can turn can then explain this happens only within the organization, and this guy is like the underboss, and this is the boss, and this is a capo. If it was mafia, I don't know what they call it in the Hells Angels, but that's what. And you would have been a storyteller as well as maybe a guy that helped make some of those predicate cases, made some hand-to-hand drug buys and things like that. Is that
sure? The RICO statute, the racketeering and corrupt organization statute, it was initially designed and put in place to use against traditional organized crime, right, mafias. But it applies beyond that. And what it does is it holds a group of people responsible for the acts of one or multiple people. It's just a very complex conspiracy case that has multiple elements, multiple moving parts, multiple predicate acts. You have to show a pattern and practice and a history of crimes amongst these people, and then tie them together and show their involvement. So it's a very complex case to make. Really experienced case agents and prosecutors work very hard to get those indictments and prove those cases and prosecute those cases. They're very difficult to make. Very difficult to make.
Yeah, they are.
There's so many moving parts to them.
Yeah, that's for sure. And so it's really hard to turn the Hells Angels, a good higher echelon storyteller. Were you able to turn anybody, a real patch-wearing Hells Angels out of that?
Yeah, we developed informants and sources from what we did and what we accomplished. That there's a very strong brotherhood within the Hells Angels, and there's a very strong loyalty. But those things and those mantras are oftentimes easier to say than they are to live up to. When someone is confronted, not just a Hells Angel, anybody is confronted with extended prison time.
Right.
And separation from their families and separation from the people they love. It's not entirely unusual that those people break from the brotherhood and break from the loyalty in any level of crime or organized crime, and end up turning on their brothers. And so this case was no different.
Yeah. As I used to say, you have a guy in some of those sentencing guidelines, you have a guy that's looking at 50 years in penitentiary, and he's got to do about 45 of them. And he's 30, 35, 40 years old. He'll rat on his mother. I mean, he's been at life.
There's some that are true believers, and they are committed, and they are going to take their lick for like whatever length of time it is. But there's others who make decisions based on self-preservation.
Yeah, really. So get done with this case, and eventually you're going to pull you out of it. So how did that work then? Did you just you just transfer offices and do that? And it seemed like you had some problems with ATF in the end, and your second book goes into a lot of that. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
I did. When the case ended, and my true identity was exposed and actually unmasked by ATF, the death and the violence threats started coming on me, on my family, on my wife, on my kids. Murder contracts were issued. The Hells Angels were holding contracts. They farmed contracts to the Aryan Brotherhood and to the MS-13, to some street gangs in Los Angeles. There was threats to poison me with the AIDS virus. There was threats to kidnap and videotape the gang rape of my wife. There was threats to kidnap my kids, which is all, to be quite honest, it's the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
If you're going to deal with violent people, they're not going to stop being violent. The tiger is not going to change his stripes. But my issue was that when those threats came, ATF underreacted to them. ATF didn't really want to deal with the aftermath, and ignored them and downplayed them, and just did not offer any legitimate protection to me and my family. In the summer of 2008, my house was attacked by arsonists amidst all these threats, and burned to the ground. And ATF got caught behind the power curve, and they didn't react. They didn't respond. They knew that they had this series of death and violence threats that were unaddressed. They had liability in the situation, and I don't even know what words to use. There were some executives within ATF who were not only incompetent, but they were corrupt. And they built a task force and assigned agents with the plan to try to frame me as the arsonist of my own house. And they did it in order to cover their own tracks for their own incompetence and their own failure to react. I didn't burn my house down. I didn't try to murder my family. There was no way they were ever going to be able to invent anything that was going to make that fly, but they tried. And so, my exit from the agency, I love ATF, and I love the agents with the boots on the ground who are out there doing the job. But there was a handful of people within my agency that were just flat dirty. And I hit a perfect storm of incompetence and arrogance and corruption. And it all came down on me at the same time.
Wow. So I guess you just went ahead and took your retirement. Were you able to pull out with your full retirement then?
I did. I retired, but I retired on my terms. I retired, when I wanted to, how I wanted to. I wasn't forced off the job. I wasn't leveraged off the job. I left calling my own shot.
So I would imagine that you did you just kind of fade into the woodwork for a while and move someplace else? Or you would have to. Hell's Angels is everywhere. And sometimes you'll have, maybe they forgot about you, but they'll have some kid that wants to make a name for themselves and knows a little bit about that story and stuff like that.
There's no running or hiding from them. They're too massive. Their intelligence network is too big. And so I don't know what term to use. I'm not hiding, but I'm in plain sight. I'm doing a podcast with you. I've written a book about the story.
Yeah, that's true.
I was not going to be one of these guys who walks around with a plastic nose and a toupee on, trying to disguise myself. I live with concern. I know that there's hatred out there for me. I know that there's people that will never forgive or never forget. Again, that's the cost of doing business. But I'll tell you this, I never set out to ruin anybody's life. I never set out to hurt anybody. I was an investigator, and I got in and next to crime and serious, violent, wicked crime at times. I never made anybody murder anybody or sell drugs or sell guns or do extortions or do assaults. I was a witness to those things. I did my job. I reported what I saw and heard and experienced out to case agents and prosecutors. And then ultimately, it's their job to deliver whatever evidence that I can help acquire to juries and to judges, and someone else decides people's guilt or innocence. I just do my best to accurately provide intelligence and evidence and information, and those people then use that to decide someone's guilt or innocence.
Yeah. Right. So it's not personal. It's just business, as the mob guys like to say. That's a good thing about working the mafia is they got rules.
Yeah, it's like I said, my objective was never to crash anybody.
Yeah.
My objective was never to go out and damage anybody, but my job was to get next to the people who were breaking the law and then report out what my experiences were. That's what I did.
All right, Jay, this has been great, man. This has been a great interview, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. And my listeners, my guys out there will just eat this one up. They like hearing from the inside like that, whether it be a reformed mobster or reformed criminal of some kind. They even had I don't know if he was reformed or not, a skyjacker that spent 40 years in the penitentiary and came out and he told us his life story and how he did this skyjacking. So really that's what we like to say here from the mouths of the men that did it. And you're one of the men that did it. And especially with the Hells Angels, this is a real rare, guys. You know, if you looked at organized crime and in the motorcycle gang world, to get this close to Hells Angels is just, I think this is one of a kind, really, as far as I know. There may be others, but there's no other penetration that I know of, I don't think, than what Jay Dobyns did here and his task force that he worked with. So my hat's off to you guys. Jay, tell everybody the names of your books again, and folks, I will put those as links on the show notes. And so I would highly recommend. I know the first one was good. I haven't looked at the second one. I know the first one's good. So tell us the name of those books again. And you can get them on Amazon, I assume. And maybe, do you have a website too?
I do. I have a website. It's just jaydobyns.com, JAYDOBYNS.com. There's links to my books there. The first book is No Angel. The second book is Catching Hell. And yeah, so like they're easy to find, they're easy to get. Yeah. And Gary, thank you for having me, and thank you to your audience for listening to our discussion, and God bless everybody out there. Be safe.
All right, Jay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of Gangland Wire. Now, don't forget to like and subscribe down below if you're on YouTube. And remember, if you are a friend or suffering from PTSD, check out the Veterans Administration resources. Just go to Google and Google PTSD and Veterans Administration or VA, and you'll find that website. And you'll find there's a hotline and there's links there to help you find resources to deal with that problem. And remember to look out for motorcycles on the road and stay safe. Bye, folks.